Hey guys, it's Alex, and today I'm here with a book review for A Season of Daring Greatly by Emerson White. This is a young adult contemporary novel about Jill, who is the first girl ever to be drafted into Major League Baseball. This book follows her time in the minor leagues as she learns to play at a completely different level and deal with the pressure of being the first girl drafted. I gave this book 5 stars. Emerson White is one of my favorite authors of all time, and just like all her other books, this one is wonderful. The first time I read this, I did give it 4 stars, but upon reread, I reread it this year. It was definitely a 5-star read for me. It's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in baseball because White is a huge baseball fan and it shows in this book. I'm also a baseball fan, and it's really fun to see it depicted so realistically, to see the process of being drafted depicted in such a realistic way. Jill is a really good player. Clearly, she gets drafted into the pros, but she doesn't immediately go to the majors. She doesn't start playing for a big team. She's playing in the minors because that's where you go when you're drafted. She's not as good as everyone else there because she's 18 years old and has just been drafted. And I think it's wonderful that it's shown in such a realistic way. I do love sports, but I don't read a whole lot of sports fiction because oftentimes I feel like it's not shown in a super realistic way. The main characters are often like the best or they improve too quickly, but this book isn't like that. This book is really showing what it's like, and I adored that. I do think, however, if you don't like baseball at least a little, you don't have to be a huge baseball fan, but I feel like you have to have at least some minor understanding of baseball to get through this book because it's a major focus of the story. There's so much else going on, but there are long descriptions of baseball and Jill discussing how she pitches and everything that she has to go through. It's just very baseball heavy if you don't at least tolerate it. I'm not the biggest fan in the world. I haven't actually been to a baseball game in a while, but I do like it. I do enjoy it, and I think even if you just like baseball a little bit, you can appreciate this book. I also think this book is genuinely hilarious. I don't normally like humor in books. It goes over my head. I just don't appreciate it. But Emerson White's writing style is just so funny. She writes these hilarious characters, and they actually make me laugh. She's written several books that have made me laugh, and the list of books that make me laugh is very short and potentially limited to just her. It's wonderful. And it's not just funny. This book is also kind of sad. I didn't actively cry, but I did tear up a few times, just because it feels so real. Nothing really tragic happens in this book. This is not one of those books. It's just about Jill and her life. But she does deal with a lot of homesickness. She worries about not being good enough to play professionally. She's still grieving her father, who died several years before. And all of those things are very small things. They're not particularly tragic, but they're written in such a way that they feel so present and close to home. They're really touching, and White has a wonderful way of making everything in her stories so small and so specific and so down to earth that you can really see this kind of thing happening and you can feel it. And I adore that. I would also like to add that this book doesn't have a typical narrative arc. I honestly don't really think there's a climax in this book so much. It's just kind of showing Jill's life, and I love that, but I also know it's not everyone's kind of thing. There are plenty of exciting things that happen in this book. There's a lot going on. Jill does a lot of things, and there's definitely a lot of character development and growth, but in terms of a typical narrative arc, I don't think there's a whole lot of that. I love that. I think it's wonderfully done. It's one of my favorite things about her writing style is that she just captures these fascinating characters, and her books essentially just turn into character studies, and I adore it. But if you are someone who likes a very plot-driven book, I don't know how much you would be able to get through this because there's not a whole lot of plot. Exciting things happen, there's a lot of character development, but it's missing out on the plot just a little bit. The only other critique that I have for this book, or the only real critique, I guess, because I've said nothing negative so far, and I think this is kind of the reason I gave it 4 stars when I first read it, is because White has a very distinctive style. Her characters have very distinctive personalities, and they're very similar throughout her books. Jill in this book is incredibly similar to Meg from The President's Daughter. It's almost like it's the same character, just in a different situation. They're not exactly the same, but they do have enough in common that I frequently call Jill Meg, and I had to edit this video and keep repeating myself because I kept calling her Meg because they are just that similar. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing. I haven't read enough of White's writing to see if that's a trend that happens in a lot of her books. I've read several of her books now, most in series, so I don't know if that's a common theme or if there's just similarities between these two particular characters, but I do think that's something that I want to keep an eye out for in her other books. However, Meg is one of my favorite characters of all time, so I really don't mind that too much. I think it's so much fun to see a character who's very similar to her in a very different situation. It's just fascinating. But there are also other things that are similar. The sense of humor is very similar, which is why this book and The President's Daughter make me laugh a lot. But character relationships are also very similar. Jill has friendships and family relationships that are very similar to the way Meg has her friendships and family relationships. Again, it's not exactly the same. There are enough differences to keep me happy, but it was something that I really noticed in this book. I also love the way sexism and feminism is dealt with. Jill isn't trying to be anything special, but at the same time she kind of is. And I like how that dichotomy is written in this book. She doesn't want to be special, she just wants to play baseball, but at the same time, she's aware that she is a girl. She's aware that she is the first girl, and that that's a huge deal. And she talks about how if she were a boy, she's not even sure that she would be playing professionally yet. She might have gone to college because that pressure wasn't on her, and that pressure affected her decision. And I really love the way it was dealt with within her character. It was also dealt with very well externally. She has to deal with the media a lot because she is a media sensation, even though she's just a minor league player who isn't known by anyone or shouldn't be known by anyone in a normal situation. Because she's a girl, the media turns out for every single one of her games, even though it's very minor leagues. She also experiences sexism from other players at different points, and I really enjoyed that. I think if you can't handle any kind of sexism in your book, or just like that being discussed in a very visceral, sometimes scary way, nothing bad happens, nothing too bad at least, but it is something that is constantly present. And I loved it. I thought it was dealt with so well, and I think White does that regularly. Is she pulls in the media and she pulls in other people. I think White does that so well in all of her books. But this is one of my favorites. This is amazing, and I would highly, highly recommend this book if you're interested in baseball, especially. But even if you're not, I think it's a wonderful book and a wonderful character study. Let me know down below if you've read A Season of Daring Greatly and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.